Wilhuff Tarkin was a human male military officer and politician who first served under the Republic during the Clone Wars, under Jedi General Even Piell. When the new regime of the Galactic Empire, ruled by Emperor Palpatine, emerged, Tarkin became its first Grand Moff. During the Clone Wars, he was involved in numerous covert missions for the Chancellor. However, he found the level of individuality among clone troopers under Jedi leadership concerning, and he looked down on the regs. As he was not a fan of the Jedi Order, Tarkin neither liked nor appreciated their role in leading the Republic military. He believed their code acted as a restraint on their ability to take severe or decisive actions, and with this, he found common ground with Anakin Skywalker, for whom he held great admiration, particularly for his military mindset. Of course, this shared view between Tarkin and Skywalker contains some element of truth, but it also shows how the Jedi Master began his descent into becoming Darth Vader. In this way, Tarkin played a small role in kindling the dark side within Skywalker. Following the enemy assault on the Citadel and the capture of Jedi General Piell and himself, Tarkin proposed that the Jedi be gradually removed from military command. When Ahsoka Tano was accused of the Jedi Temple bombing that killed many, Tarkin stood at the forefront of efforts to prove her guilty. His bias and hatred toward the Jedi Order made him deaf to the possibility, and even clear evidence, that Tano could not have been involved in such sinister acts. Even after Tano was proven innocent with the help of her master, Anakin Skywalker, Tarkin was merely surprised that she was not the culprit, but his distrust of the Jedi remained, as the true perpetrator had also been a Jedi. Tarkin's unyielding and uncompromising view of the Jedi would define the next phase of his career as a military leader. In the Age of the Empire, after the Jedi were defeated, Tarkin saw the New Order as an opportunity for greater power and control. He remained Admiral of the Imperial Navy before being promoted to Moff by Emperor Palpatine, charged with overseeing the new Imperial Army. Tarkin eventually became the first Grand Moff of the Empire, primarily governing the Outer Rim territories. Due to his rank, he was regarded as one of the primary leaders of the Empire, alongside the Emperor and Darth Vader. Tarkin, however, I will argue, despite his high rank, was an incompetent Imperial officer. Was he a fierce figure during the Galactic War? Yes. Did he appear bold and outspoken? Certainly. But how many true victories in battle did he actually achieve? Hardly a handful. His role and involvement in the creation of the Death Star only showed he had less tactical battle skills. He, however, earned the Emperor's endorsement for constructing the terror-inspiring Death Star. His rule by fear doctrine, which proposed that overwhelming displays of force were the most effective means of maintaining order and compelling submission, became the foundation for the Empire's doctrine of fear. Tarkin depended solely on the Death Star to overcome the Empire's enemies. This makes the idea of the battle station deeply ironic, for while its mere presence was meant to make foes flee or submit, it ultimately had the opposite effect, inspiring the enemy to believe that no force, no matter how powerful, was insurmountable. By destroying Alderaan with the Death Star, Tarkin grew overconfident, believing he would surely eliminate the rebellion completely at their base on Yavin 4, but this arrogance would lead to his downfall. Before the Battle of Yavin, also known as the Battle of the Death Star, Rebel Alliance members Jyn Erso and Cassian Andor secured the detailed plans and schematics of the Imperial battle station. They managed to transmit them to the Rebel fleet moments before the Death Star's blast reached them. Through these transmissions, the rebellion discovered a critical weak point within the station. As the Empire prepared to annihilate the rebel base on Yavin 4, an Imperial officer aboard the Death Star warned Tarkin about the possibility of a successful rebel counterattack, but Tarkin dismissed the warning. Luke Skywalker, leading a squadron of rebel starfighters, fired proton torpedoes directly into the Death Star's shaft. Tarkin, oblivious to his impending doom, perished as the battle station exploded above the moon. With Tarkin's reputation destroyed and the appointment of new Imperial officers such as Grand General Cassio Tag, the Death Star became infamously known as Tarkin's Folly. Pride, or in this case sinister overconfidence, indeed comes before a fall. Kendall Ozzel was a male officer who served in the Republic Army and later in the Galactic Empire as an admiral. However, as he transitioned into the military rule of the Empire, he was engaged to a woman who, one night, urged him to join the Rebel Alliance. He refused, stating painfully and in tears as he held her that his loyalty was to the Empire. He parted ways with his would-be wife, and after the destruction of the first Death Star, he was promoted to Rear Admiral and became a member of the Joint Chiefs of the Imperial military. Serving alongside Darth Vader as the ranking officer of his Death Squadron, Ozzel was constantly on edge. He once witnessed the Sith Lord force choke Grand General Cassio Tag and was tasked with preparing Vader's flagship, the Executor. Being the ranking officer in charge of the Sith Lord's personal vessel made Admiral Ozzel proud, yet his pride often led to foolish tactical decisions that tested Vader's patience. At one point, when he and General Maximilian Veers met with Darth Vader at his castle, Ozzel shared his opinion on the best strategy for eradicating the rebellion, suggesting that the Death Squadron fleet should move from world to find and destroy them. As he expressed himself, he said to the Sith Lord, "Your Death Squadron must be brought to bear immediately. It's ludicrous for us to keep it." To this, Darth Vader questioned his use of the word ludicrous. Ozzel, immediately whimpering and apologizing, told Vader he meant no disrespect. The Admiral, because of his position and the company he served in, often overextended himself in an effort to impress his superiors, but overcoming the Empire's enemies required far more than that. Wit, patience, and coordinated plans were essential elements for achieving victory. Admiral Ozzel also had a subordinate, Captain Firmus Piet, who felt that Ozzel's tactics and leadership abilities were far below competent. From the outset, Ozzel demonstrated no real tactical instinct as a leader, nor did he possess the drive that Piet believed a commanding officer should have. Piet seemed to understand how to seize every advantage and opportunity to defeat the enemy, while Ozzel simply squandered or wasted them. The Admiral's glaring lack of vision made him appear as though he had no idea what he was doing, or what was needed to be done. Piet would later witness his superior's execution firsthand. Ozzel, on the other hand, considered Piet overly ambitious and excessively enthusiastic. Vader later granted Ozzel official command of the Death Squadron fleet, yet maintained de facto authority over its operations. The focus of Ozzel's new assignment was to track down the hidden main base of the Alliance. Thousands of probe droids were dispatched throughout the galaxy in search of the Rebel Alliance's headquarters. One probe droid detected an occupied settlement on Hoth, an icy planet that served as the temporary headquarters of the rebellion. When Rebel Captain Han Solo spotted the droid, he immediately destroyed it, but it was already too late, as it had transmitted its data to the Executor for Admiral Ozzel, Captain Piet, and General Veers to review. Ozzel once again displayed a sluggish and poorly proactive response to the newly uncovered evidence about their enemies. He doubted that a rebel base could be on the planet, insisting the transmission showed only minimal signs of habitation. Vader, however, thought otherwise and immediately ordered the fleet to set course for Hoth. When Vader withdrew to his private quarters, Ozzel was left to command the fleet and employ his own battle strategy, and this is where things got messy. Perhaps hoping to impress the Sith Lord without any well-thought-out strategy or plan, Ozzel ordered the Star Destroyers of Death Squadron to emerge from hyperspace directly above the planet, believing this sudden appearance would shock the rebels. The tactic failed. The Rebel Alliance had already been alerted to a likely attack after Captain Han Solo's destruction of the probe droid. Every attempt from the Executor to unleash heavy fire on the Rebel base proved futile, as the rebels had activated their deflector shields. After being informed by General Veers of Admiral Ozzel's insufferable and enraging tactical blunder, the enraged Vader opened a channel to Ozzel aboard the Executor's bridge and force-choked him before his subordinate, Captain Piet, allowing no chance for explanation. Vader then promoted Piet to Admiral. As Ozzel collapsed to the floor, his life being snuffed out, he thought back on his choices, regretting his loyalty to the Empire and wishing he had listened to his fiancée's plea to join the Rebel Alliance. Though the Empire won the Battle of Hoth, Ozzel's blunder had provided the rebels with enough time to evacuate the planet. From a wealthy family and one of the Imperial Navy's most decorated starship captains, Conan Antonio Motti was the commander of the Star Destroyer Steel Talon. Though Admiral Motti was among the Emperor's potential candidates for the position of Grand Moff, it was ultimately given to Wilhuff Tarkin. Motti was later promoted to Vice Admiral. He remained loyal to Grand Moff Tarkin and firmly believed in the Death Star's ability to destroy the Rebel Alliance. Ambitious and calculating, he approached Tarkin with the proposal to use the Death Star as a demonstration of Imperial power over their enemies, driven also by his desire to become the Grand Moff's right-hand man. Within the planet-destroying battle station, Vice Admiral Motti served as head of naval operations. He was a strict leader with unwavering faith in the Death Star's capacity to subdue, conquer, and bring worlds under Imperial control. He assisted Grand Moff Tarkin in testing the superweapon. However, when one of the operators failed to execute the firing sequence correctly, Motti moved to investigate the cause, only for Tarkin to personally intervene and handle the matter himself. During a meeting of the Joint Chiefs in the conference room, after learning that the Death Star's plans had been stolen, Motti expressed confidence that the Rebel Alliance posed no real threat to the battle station. General Cassio Tag disagreed, arguing that the Alliance had support within the Imperial Senate. Their debate was interrupted when Tarkin and Vader entered the chamber. Tarkin announced that the Emperor had dissolved the Senate, reaffirming, much to Motti's delight, that the Death Star was the ultimate instrument to keep systems in submission. Smiling with sinister satisfaction, Motti went on to challenge Darth Vader's faith in the Force. Vader warned him not to underestimate its power, but Motti mockingly dismissed the Sith Lord's beliefs, arguing that the Force had not helped recover the stolen Death Star plans or reveal the location of the Rebel base. Within moments, Motti began to choke and gasp for breath as Vader demonstrated the very power he mocked, giving him a brief dose of Force choke. The Force choke ceased only at Tarkin's command. Later, in an incident report, Motti criticized Vader's attack as an act of religious proselytization and reaffirmed his faith in the Death Star as the Emperor's ultimate weapon. The Admiral's excessive trust in the Death Star was clearly born from his obsession with power. It appeared his best and sole tactic against the Empire's enemies was the planet-killing battle station, and anything outside that was a waste of time, unnecessary, or, like the way he described the Force, an outdated ancient religion and a sorcerer's ways. The Admiral viewed the technological might of the Empire as unquestionably superior, and his arrogance blinded him. His reliance on the Death Star's destructive power alone exposed his lack of tactical insight and true strategic competence. In his mind, the logic was simple. Why place faith in mystical powers when we command, in our own hands, a weapon of such fearsome and formidable strength? Motti later supervised the final test and execution of the Death Star's power in the destruction of Alderaan, carried out under Tarkin and Vader's orders to compel Princess Leia Organa to reveal the location of the Rebel base. Vice Admiral Motti obeyed without hesitation, taking grim satisfaction in seeing an entire planet reduced to dust by the Empire's symbol of absolute authority and control. Before Alderaan's destruction, the overly ambitious Motti had privately approached Grand Moff Tarkin once more, boasting of the Death Star's invulnerability and the power it represented. He suggested that such strength placed the Grand Moff second only to the Emperor himself, and subtly implied his willingness to serve at Tarkin's side in this newfound order. Even though Tarkin dismissed Motti's near-treasonous ambition, the Grand Moff already stood as the second most powerful figure in the galaxy, commanding the Death Star itself. Motti merely recognized this reality and sought to carve out even a small share of the authority that Tarkin held over the battle station. During the Battle of Yavin, the Rebel Alliance had already discovered the Death Star's fatal weakness, the thermal exhaust port leading to its main reactor. As Luke Skywalker piloted his X-Wing starfighter toward the target, Motti remained on the command deck beside an operator, certain of Imperial victory. But the Restorer of the Jedi fired his proton torpedoes directly into the shaft, triggering the chain reaction that destroyed the battle station. Vice Admiral Motti perished aboard the Death Star, the weapon he so proudly revered, its fiery remains scattering across Yavin's orbit. There is no better way to describe Admiral Cassius Constantine than as a self-serving, egotistical, and power-hungry leader. Admiral Constantine was from Coruscant, and during the Galactic War, he was dispatched to the Lothal system, where the rebel team known as the Ghost Crew, or Spectres, led by Kanan Jarrus, had their base. Constantine's mission as Admiral was straightforward, but his ego and poor tactical skills made him a complete joke. He was the kind of leader who would go as far as sacrificing his own men to save his own life. Nevertheless, the Admiral was a by-the-book military officer, following the Imperial Navy's handbook diligently, despite his smug and arrogant superiority. As commander of the Imperial Star Destroyer Relentless, Constantine worked alongside the Inquisitorius to capture and neutralize the Ghost. On one of his missions with the Grand Inquisitor, they failed to capture the rebel team, who escaped with help from an Imperial Information Office staffer, Tsibo. As he often did, Constantine tried to shift the blame for the failed mission to the Grand Inquisitor, until he learned that a tracking device had been attached to the rebel vessel. Even with that advantage, they still failed to capture them. Constantine failed numerous missions, largely because he was not a team player. He valued his own ego far more than any mission or any person. The Admiral was also prone to tactical blunders and errors. On one mission, under the command of the Sith Lord Darth Vader during an assault on the Phoenix Rebel Squadron, Constantine activated the Relentless's tractor beam to ensnare his opponents, but mistakenly captured Vader's TIE Advanced X-1 starfighter instead. In panic and fear for his life, the Admiral, as always, blamed his error on a subordinate bridge officer. Constantine also served under the Inquisitor known as the Fifth Brother, who was determined to stop the rebels with or without the Admiral's help. Strangely, he had become partners with someone who he closely resembled in character. Although Constantine frequently clashed with both subordinates and superiors, his partnership with the Fifth Brother yielded some results, as they discovered that the Phoenix Rebel team was hiding on a shipping world in the Lothal sector. They succeeded in flushing the Rebel cell out of hiding, but failed once again to neutralize them. Constantine's repeated failures to capture the Ghost crew continued even when the Weequay pirate Hondo Ohnaka helped track their starship. It appeared the Admiral was a stickler for failure. The rebels escaped yet again, with the gravitational pull of a nearby star cluster forcing the Imperials to retreat. Another opportunity arose for Constantine to destroy the Phoenix Squadron, but he only managed to prevent them from stealing fuel supplies that the Ghost crew later succeeded in recovering anyway. The Admiral's superior, Governor Arinda Pryce, had grown tired of his failures and met with Grand Moff Wilhuff Tarkin, who provided her with the services of Grand Admiral Thrawn. Constantine, however, continued to make excuses, claiming that Pryce was merely overestimating the threat posed by the Phoenix rebels and dismissing them as a localized insurgency. The Admiral's tendency to shift blame and make excuses revealed his lack of true leadership or military discipline, traits essential to any competent officer. Hence his continued failure. The Admiral always seemed to need to be spoon-fed or teleguided to perform his duties, lacking both the skills and temperament required for the office he held. When Grand Admiral Thrawn sought to capture the fugitive former Senator Mon Mothma, he tasked Pryce and Constantine with intercepting the rebel ships outside the Archeon Nebula, a stellar nursery with a highly combustible atmosphere where new stars were being born. Commanding 2 Imperial Star Destroyers, Constantine and Pryce prepared to engage the rebel ship Ghost. At one point, Constantine believed victory was at hand, convinced that the Y-Wings piloted by Ezra Bridger and rebel ally John Vander had arrived too late to stop him. However, Harrison Dula ordered the pilots to fire proton torpedoes into the nebula, triggering massive explosions that severely damaged both Pryce's and Constantine's Star Destroyers. Constantine also had a mind of his own, believing he could employ other strategies apart from those he was ordered to follow. Upon discovering the location of the Phoenix Squadron's base on Atollon, Thrawn ordered Constantine to deploy his fleet, the 7th Fleet, into the system. Constantine soon argued with Thrawn, insisting on using overwhelming force against the rebels, contrary to Thrawn's strategic approach. When Thrawn ordered him to return his Interdictor-class heavy cruiser to its assigned coordinates, Constantine refused, driven by ambition and a desire for personal glory. He openly expressed his frustration, claiming he was tired of Thrawn's games. His insubordination and ego ultimately led to his destruction and contributed to the Empire's downfall. A leader should never be laid back, but Satoris Ramda's overly relaxed and negligent approach would ultimately cost the Empire dearly. He was a male human general from Rhinekath III, who supervised the Scarif deployment. The Imperial base on Scarif served as a post for seasoned officers nearing retirement. It was protected by a powerful planetary shield gate, rendering it nearly impenetrable. Ramda must have felt this abode of peace and rest could not at any point suffer or face infiltration by rebel scum. His duties seemed so simple that he could never have imagined there would ever be a need to be on guard. Before the Battle of Yavin, also known as the Battle of the Death Star, Orson Callan Krennic, director of the Imperial Department of Advanced Weapons Research, arrived on Scarif to conduct an investigation. The purpose of his mission was to locate all transmissions sent by the Imperial scientist Galen Erso, who, before his death, had provided the Rebel Alliance with vital information about the Death Star. Of course, Satoris Ramda was taken by surprise at the severity of this investigation, as numerous transmissions had been made from the now-deceased human scientist, Galen Erso. He still did not see what was at stake. All of this was shocking and extremely unexpected. As he must have pondered on the reasons for the investigation or what was so important in the scientist's transmission, he was unknowingly giving the Rebel Alliance more time to succeed with their mission rather than get his soldiers on the move. The general had no backup, contingency, or fail-safe plan, revealing just how complacent he was. In the midst of relentless battles against the rebellion, he failed to prepare his soldiers or fortify his base against attacks from all directions. His laxity likely stemmed from the belief that Scarif's defenses were impregnable and that the chance of his garrison being defeated was minimal. During Krennic's investigation, Rebel Alliance forces eventually infiltrated the Scarif Shield Gate, seeking to steal the Death Star plans. Their surprise assault on the Imperial base allowed them to gain access to the dreaded battle station's schematics. They soon received reinforcements from the Alliance fleet. In a bid to ensure that the rebels did not transmit the plans, Grand Moff Tarkin ordered the Death Star to fire upon Scarif. This action also served to eliminate Krennic, his rival, and prevent him from assuming command of the Death Star. The blast resulted in the total destruction of the planet, marking not only the end of the Scarif installation, but also the demise of the slow, unprepared, and laid-back General Sotoris Ramda. An ambitious, opportunistic, and cold woman, Arenda Pryce was born and bred on Lothal, into a family recognized for its mining business, Pryce Mining. She detested her roots, seeking instead the sophistication and influence of Coruscant, a planet considered the heart of galactic civilization with its political, cultural, and economic power. Through cunning, betrayal, and underhanded methods, she became governor of Lothal. Due to her disdain for her home planet, Pryce did not hesitate to sell it out to the Empire, granting them full control. The Empire quickly established the planet as its local headquarters. Even though the people of Lothal strongly opposed her actions, Pryce's relentless ambition made her turn a deaf ear, and her rule became nothing short of tyrannical. In matters of romance, Pryce never engaged in any romantic relationships, despite being surrounded by numerous men. She struck fear into the hearts of many men, and she never allowed her interactions with some to evolve into anything personal. Being the type of woman she was perceived as a champion, a fierce leader, a mother figure, and a no-nonsense authority. At one point, she left Lothal for Bataan to rescue her parents. In the process, she killed a fellow Imperial agent who stood in her way, and detonated explosives at a mine where Bataan insurgents were hiding, erasing any evidence of her involvement in the agent's death and causing the deaths of numerous civilians. The governor cared deeply about her parents and would do anything to keep them safe and well, just as she would for her position in the Galactic Empire. Upon her return to Lothal, she faced a new and persistent threat, the Phoenix Rebel Cell. Most of her efforts to eliminate them ended in failure, as the rebellion continued to expand and destabilize Imperial control. Her subordinate, Constantine, whom she saw more as a politician than a soldier, failed to capture the Ghost Crew. Frustrated by his repeated failures, Pryce sought the assistance of the tactical and meticulous Grand Admiral Thrawn. While his involvement offered more effective strategies, it also exposed her vulnerabilities. Thrawn quickly deduced, after a rebel incursion, that a mole likely existed within the Imperial ranks, feeding the rebels sensitive information. Pryce's inability to stop the Phoenix Cell could often be traced to her emotional approach, though Thrawn advised her to remove sentiment from her decision-making, but she would often fail at restraining herself from responding to certain situations emotionally. Even with the help of the assassin Rook, she failed to capture the rebels. Emotions again undermined her tactics, rendering them weak and ineffective. She achieved only a minor victory. The rebels lost a leader while attempting to rescue Hera Syndulla, one of their own. Pryce celebrated with a parade, which Thrawn found unnecessary and distracting, given that the rebels had destroyed the Imperial fuel supply, a hollow victory at best. Pryce's final moments revealed her greatest fear, the Lothwolves. Yep. Held in the jaws of a Lothwolf tamed by Ezra Bridger and threatened with death, she was forced to provide the rebels with the clearance codes required to access the Lothal Imperial complex. She ultimately chose to die aboard the complex as it exploded, cementing her loyalty to the Empire. Bulvin was a gunnery captain with a casual approach to his duties. Though he exhibited a merciless and determined desire to fight the enemies of the Empire, he was a leader prone to poor judgment and negligence. This trait would lead him to make a decision that seemed insignificant, but proved costly in its eventual consequence. As a member of the Galactic Empire's Navy, he served under Darth Vader, who tasked him with overseeing the Imperial weapons development project on the planet Faline. This responsibility kept him on his toes, as he sought to avoid the wrath of the dreaded Sith Lord. Upon Vader's arrival to inspect their progress, Bulvin immediately reported an accident at a biological research facility that had led to the spread of a flesh-eating bacterium on the planet's surface. He suggested incinerating the plague from orbit, but Vader instead ordered an orbital bombardment. Bulvin's subordinate, Chief Gunnery Officer Lieutenant Hija, fired the turbo laser from their Star Destroyer, the Devastator, killing 200,000 Falline inhabitants. These casualties concerned Bulvin very little, as his primary focus was avoiding Vader's wrath. At the time the Rebel Alliance stole the Death Star plans, Bulvin served under Captain Mulchive Wormis on the Devastator as gunnery captain. Even though the Devastator captured the Rebel vessel, which was assumed to be carrying the plans over Tatooine, Bulvin failed to secure them. Bulvin's ultimate error was allowing an empty escape pod to drift away without much thought. When Lieutenant Hija alerted him to the pod, Bulvin assumed it had been released due to a short circuit or false instruction. Unknown to him, the Rebel astromech droid R2-D2 was inside, carrying the Death Star plan securely in his memory core. Bulvin's poor judgment would ultimately cost the Empire. His primary concern in refraining from blasting the escape pod was safeguarding his career and prospects for promotion. Under the Empire's new regulation of rewarding soldiers based on confirmed kills, he deliberately chose not to fire. His self-focused decision further slowed the progress of the Empire and only brought the Empire closer to defeat. At the height of the Empire's expansion, Leo Partagaz served as a major in the Imperial Security Bureau. He oversaw meetings at the ISB Central Office on Coruscant, the Imperial capital, and was known for making sound, intelligent decisions. With his wealth of experience, he was capable of devising well-reasoned strategies. The Major oversaw the ISB board, which comprised the highest echelon of field operatives. Under his wing were 18 ISB sector supervisors, their attendants, and members of the Imperial Army. As an uncompromising leader, Partagaz strictly adhered to standards, welcoming only suggestions and inputs that aligned with them. During a meeting with members of the ISB, he asked about their purpose. When the answers did not meet his expectations, he declared that the Bureau existed to treat the sickness of disorder within the Empire. At the time Partagaz became leader of the ISB board, the Empire needed a strong hand to curb the growing rebel threat in the galaxy. The Major insisted that every mission and duty have a clearly defined purpose, believing this would improve the effectiveness of his colleagues and subordinates. He frequently held meetings with board members, allowing him to create analytical strategies and identify errors in a timely manner. Partagaz approved Dedra Meero's request for additional resources to capture Andor, a rebel spy believed to be operating under the leadership of a central figure the Empire called Axis, later revealed to be Luthen Rael, a former Imperial Army sergeant. Partagaz failed to trust Dedra, who struggled to earn his respect. He later dismissed her mission to locate Axis and redirected her focus to the planet Gorman, a world of special interest to the Empire. What he failed to realize, despite his tactical brilliance, was that a good leader sometimes must listen to subordinates. By diverting Dedra's attention from the rebel leader to Gorman, he inadvertently aided the progress of the rebellion. Axis later attempted suicide when confronted by the relentless Dedra, but he was quickly stabilized by her team, as she still sought to extract the rebel secrets locked within the Spy Master's mind. Later, Axis was painfully put to rest by one of his own to protect the Rebel Alliance. Partagaz eventually arrested Dedra after she discovered Axis's identity. Her raid on the galactic antiquities and objects of interest had been deemed unauthorized, as she entered areas beyond her assignment and hoarded classified files related to the Death Star, risking exposure of the Empire's top-secret weapon. Her actions, combined with the presence of a mole, Lonnie Jung, allowed key Death Star information to reach the Rebel Alliance. Had Partagaz trusted her and provided adequate resources, this failure could have been avoided. The consequences of this failure weighed heavily on Partagaz. He became anxious, less tactically decisive, and intensely pressured to prevent the rebels from exploiting the stolen data. Facing the Emperor's wrath was the last thing he ever wanted in his service to the Empire. Alone in his meeting room, disturbed and awaiting his inevitable end, Partagaz was alerted that stormtroopers had arrived to arrest him. Considering the punishment that awaited him for his failure, he drew his blaster and ended his own life.